next to them, and we got reined in for 3 days. Paul had worked on the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline in the 70s, but now was against drilling in the Arctic Refuge. I next rafted down the Kisters River, which was in flood stage. I hit some impossible rapids that flipped my raft, sending me miles down the river without a life preserver or wetsuit, and I nearly died. I managed to get out, and had a hard time surviving the night with freezing rain coming down. I spent the next day drying my gear. I caught up with Paul and Mary, and they loaned me their fishing rod and gave me some matches, so I was able to continue on with my journey. About a week later, I exited the mountains for the coastal plain, and I encountered some muskox. Remnants of the Ice Age, muskox formed tight circles around their calves when threatened. While this was good defense against wolves and bears, whalers and traders shot the whole herd, and the tendency of muskox to stay by their fallen ones made them easy to be entirely exterminated around 1900. Muskox were reintroduced to the refuge in the mid-1970s. With their reintroduction, the Arctic Refuge is one of the few places on Earth with all of its original inhabitants still intact. But as you can see here from this map of the muskox range, overlaid with the proposed development, the proposed oil development is right on the muskox range. I saw many signs of caribou on the coastal plain as well, a reminder that just a month earlier more than 100,000 had massed here to give birth. But the proposed oil development is right on top of the core calving grounds for the caribou. You can see this from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service map, how the calving grounds in green are in some of the same locations as the proposed development, shown here in red, year after year. The National Academy of Sciences released a report in 2002 showing that oil development had a massive negative impact on caribou around Prudhoe Bay. Polar bear, too, depend upon the Arctic Refuge. The coastal plain forms the densest denning ground of polar bear on Earth. But the proposed development is right on top of the polar bear denning area, threatening the existence of polar bear in the Arctic Refuge. On this top map, you can see how there are far fewer polar bear denning on land west of the Arctic Refuge, where oil development has occurred. On the lower map, you can see how the proposed development is right on where polar bears make their dens. I hope you have time to check out my book, Arctic Quest, to find out more about the critical need to save the Arctic Refuge. You can order an autographed copy of Arctic Quest at www.arcticrefuge.org.
That was incredible. What an experience. Not all of us get that opportunity. How remote was it? How difficult was it to plan this and to get there?
Yeah, this is about the remotest place on Earth, and when I told the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service what I wanted to do, they said, "Don't do that, you're not going to make it." It is extremely remote. You can only reach it with bush plane usually, and I think I'm among the first to have ever hiked from Prudhoe Bay into the refuge. But it is so remote that the Fish and Wildlife Service strongly discourages people from just walking alone, and they encourage people to go in groups and have satellite phones and be a lot safer than what I did.
And of course the native people are adapted to this land and to this lifestyle.
Yeah, the native peoples have been walking across these areas and living off the land for thousands of years, and so they were quite impressed with my journey there, because a lot of the young people now don't go hiking. They use four-wheelers and snowmobiles, and a lot of the native elders have been trying to get their young people to be out walking in the wilderness more.
They don't want to see oil development in the area. It threatens their lifestyle, even though they've adapted to some modern ways. Environmentalists don't want to see it. The wildlife doesn't want it. The oil companies say they can do it ecologically, but yet you showed that there really is some pollution if you develop the resources.
Right. There is no way to develop oil without causing massive impacts. They've tried to claim that they can use diagonal means of getting to the oil, but that's just a tiny difference. What they have is a massive industrial nightmare at Prudhoe Bay, and that's exactly what they would put onto the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge, and would destroy the heart of this last intact Arctic ecosystem left in North America, and it would destroy the way of life of the Gwich'in native peoples who have been living up there for 30,000 years off the caribou. And they're one of the last people on Earth still living as they traditionally have. And to destroy the heart of this refuge where all the caribou come to breed, I think would be quite a tragedy.
And the amount of oil really isn't that much. Plus, we have to remember that over 90% of Alaska is open for development.
Right, right. This is the last 5% of coastal plain of the North Slope of Alaska, and so to protect it is very, very reasonable, particularly when you see how it's the heart of this huge ecosystem, and would destroy the last Arctic ecosystem that we have left.
Over the years on Eco News, I have covered this issue. It seems as though it never goes away. When we first worked to try and protect it and create a national wildlife refuge, conservationists thought the job is done. But then we keep hearing new proposals.
Yeah, you would think because it's a national wildlife refuge that would mean it's protected. But what we need is an act by Congress to designate the coastal plain as wilderness. And when that's done, then it will be permanently protected. But until that's done, we're going to have to stay vigilant and make sure that they do not allow drilling in the coastal plain.
Your book was a great story. It was so much fun to read it, and I didn't have to suffer through some of the trials and tribulations that you did, but yet your attitude was such that being in this beautiful area didn't seem to bother you what you had to suffer physically.
Well, it was definitely challenging at times, the mosquitoes and being flushed down a flooded Arctic river and almost dying on a few occasions. But the experience was just so tremendous, just being in such an incredible place, or anywhere you looked at any moment, you're just in awe at the beauty of it all, that it was a very transforming experience. And it's really made me want to dedicate my life to protecting this area because I know firsthand just how important it is and how amazing it is.
Is this why you wanted to share with us what you did?
Yeah, I think the world needs to know that this area needs protected, that we've already destroyed so much, and that this is the last of the Arctic ecosystems that we have left. And if we destroy that, it's just devastating, this legacy, all the work that people have done to protect this place, and it just desperately needs to be saved.
And even though the caribou have to suffer the mosquitoes and the few individuals who get to this area like you, they really provide a fantastic food source for the migratory birds.
Right.
It's a complete ecosystem.
Right. There's 160 species of birds from 6 continents and all 50 states that breed there. So it affects the ecology all over the world. And many of the birds you see flying through almost every place on Earth is going there to breed in the coastal plain.
So many resources. Thank you so very much for telling us about the Arctic. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you.
I have been speaking with Chad Kister, coordinator of the Arctic Refuge Defense Campaign and author of Arctic Quest, Odyssey Through a Threatened Wilderness. And for viewers who would like more information, at the end of the credits we will have an address and telephone number on screen. We love to hear from you, so please call or write. And be sure to join us again for another edition of Eco News, your best source of current environmental news that affects you and your future. On behalf of our nonprofit organization, Educational Communications, thank you for your support. I'm Nancy Perlman, wishing you a natural, unspoiled environment.